Hello and welcome to the Varietal Show. My name is Rory and you are watching Varietal Literature's YouTube channel. If you've never been here before, or if you came in on the folklore streams, tonight's a bit different. We're not covering folklore tonight. What we do is we play what's called tabletop RPGs, solo tabletop RPGs. Basically what we do is we try to write a story. Not a great story, but just a short story or a vignette or a character. And if you're here live, you can come and join in the chat, which is already bustling with messages, and you throw in ideas, and I'll try to incorporate them the best I can. And by the end of it, we read it all out, see what we came up with, which is usually either some form of unintentional eldritch horror, or sometimes very sweet, scenic kind of things. But I never quite know what we'll come out with. The tone of the game doesn't seem to ever quite determine the tone of the story we make. If you're not watching this live, though, feel free to participate anyways. It's just a description of a game, and I'll keep you company while you do it. But you do have the option of going down into the description below, where there will be timestamps, where you can jump ahead to whatever section interests you the most. And just to give you a rough overview, I'm going to introduce the mechanics of the game, which are pretty simple. And then we'll start writing the game, which is going to involve building some characters and stuff here. At the very end, I will read out whatever it is we came up with. So whatever section of the show interests you, if you're not watching live, you can use the timestamps to jump ahead to. Otherwise, join us in the live chat, where we will be trying to pitch ideas and put together a story. Witchery says, oops, all Smurf is a really fun username, which is the name of the person who wrote the game tonight. In indie developer, I assume. I don't know them, but it's on itch.io, and that's kind of what their scene is. And Tammy is here. Tammy joined us at the Fireside Fairy Tales on Tuesday, and was a very kind and generous participant, and I'm happy to see you here, Tammy. I hope you enjoy this format as well. Jumstore is here as well. Welcome back, Jumstore. Thank you for watching. Zombie Wolf made it on time. That's okay. There's always a bit of faff in the beginning, even if you come a bit late. GS, thank you for coming back, GS. Good to see you. And I think that's everybody. So let's talk about the game. This one is one of those like rules light, but I think it has a lot of potential. Before I go in, so only like the hardcores who are watching the whole intro will know this one. If you are thinking of making a Christmas game, I said this already, but I'm going to keep saying it because it comes to me every week. And your thought is, oh, let's make a game where you generate a Hallmark-style romance story. Don't. There's like 8 of them already. That's about half of the games about Christmas on itch.io. And I don't know, I'm sure I'll play one of them. They are mechanically different, but there's just, that concept has been done. That's mine. This is Rory's hot tips for new developers. This part of the show is called litgames. It is the show, basically. We sometimes have other segments, but we don't do it that often. And this part of the show, it stands for literature games, which is sort of a catch-all for a variety of type of games where we use things like dice and so on to get prompts. There's sort of games. I think you could probably argue they're more just prompt structures for creativity, which is completely fine with me. And the game that we're going to play tonight has a bit of an implied name. Its official name is Oh Holy ... What Happened Last Night. I think what it means to do is sort of take the cadence of Oh Holy Night, but put a bit of a blue language in there for night. But they didn't want to do that on itch.io, I assume. So it's ... But anybody else, I think, can infer what they're saying here. But I'm going to read the brief little paragraph that introduces it. But if you're not the kind of person who really gets along with a person reading out loud here, just so you know, the premise is basically The Hangover meets Santa's Elves. And we're there the day after trying to fix some stuff. And there's some charts here that generate prompts for character and story. And there's a way to resolve stuff if you want to roll to see if you succeed or fail. So here's the color text from the game. Santa's out of town until the night of Christmas Eve, but he left you all, a group of his most trusted North Pole townsfolk, in charge of the North Pole until he got back. You did what anyone would do with a magical city at their fingertips. Through a massive rager! After a little too much eggnog, you've all woken up with two problems, a massive hangover, and North Pole in disrepair. You've got until midnight tonight, Christmas Eve, to put the North Pole back to the way it was, or hide it well enough nobody will notice, so Santa can leave for his trip around the world without a hitch. Now, if you are playing along, and you want to play along... Oh, let me get rid of the card so you can read this. If you're playing along, or you want to play along, or whatever else... it's going to be hard for me to get this into shot, but I'm going to show you the... actually, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to do this a different way. Let's hope this doesn't mess up the stream. I'm going to snip it. And put it in here. There we go. Okay. So this is the character creation chart. So if you're at home and you're like, I want to make my own character in this... You're welcome to do it. What you need is 4d6s, and I'll walk you through how it works right now. If you folks want to be characters that come along on this, if that would be your preference. So, I'm going to roll the 4d6. If you have 4d6, if you don't know what a d6 is, it's a 6-sided dice. If you ever hear D anything, d20, d10, d12, that refers to the number of sides on the dice. A d6 is what most people just consider a dice. So, you take your 4d6 and you roll them. Man, I wish I rolled this when I was DMing last night. 2 6s and 2 4s. And you just sort of randomly pick one. I'll pick one of the 4s. And that gives you your species on the first one here. So the species is a sentient toy. Whoops. Nope. Not what I wanted you to do. I wanted you... There we go. Come on. How about instead of putting a bunch of money into stupid things like AI Google, how about you instead undo Microsoft's crimes on how they format pictures and make a better system for that? Format pictures into a Word document. So our first is... why am I center justified? Bum, 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 bum. Nope, not that. There we go. Okay, so we rolled a 4 first, so that's a sentient toy. And if you do roll your 4d6 in the chat, let me know what you came up with for your character, even if you don't want to actually stick with them the whole time. Our next one was a 6, which puts us as a personality is whimsical. I may re-roll this. This sounds a little dull for a main character who just drank himself into a blackout. And then for your last 2d6s, you pick from your special skills list. And everybody has 2 special skills. I'll tell you how the stats for them work in a second. But for me, it's a 4 and a 6, which means navigation and tinkering. Zombie Wolf says, how does a sentient toy get drunk? If it has organs, does that mean it can bleed if its legs fall off? Well, simple. It drinks toy booze. Obviously. Just to say I don't know. Okay. Once you have those things, the 4d6 determined, you go to your character stats. You will have 2 stats. The first one is merry, and the second one is bright. Again, I'm sorry the way it cuts it off. Merry is your physical skills, so that would be running, climbing, fighting, intimidation. And bright is your thinking skills, creativity, leadership, persuasion, deception, stuff like that. So merry and bright. Those are your two skills. Everyone gets merry and bright. They're different than your special skills. So merry, physical stats, and bright, mental stats. Tammy says toy booze with a smirking face. GS says drinks sentient gin. And Zombie Wolf says right up there with invisible tea for the little ones' tea parties. Exactly. Now you're getting it. Try not to think of the cosmic nightmare that is self-aware toys. Okay, and the way this works, and this is the point where if you're not like into tabletop RPGs and you're just here to come up with goofy ideas and make a story, you can zone out for about 2 minutes here. But for anybody else who's interested in the sort of stats and inner workings of it, it's pretty straightforward, but you know, it is what it is. So each stat starts at -1 because the North Pole hasn't been unionized yet to get you better stats. That's what it says in the game, which I love. But you have 3 points to divide among your merry and bright stats as you choose at the start of the game. If you put them all in one stat or divide between two is up to you. So you have 3 points. They both start at -1. And what that means is when you roll a dice, your result, if it's, let's say I rolled some dice to see if I could beat someone up. So I'm using my merry stats. Whatever I roll will have a -1 off it. So if I rolled a 6, it'd become a 5. But I have 3 points I can put in. And if this isn't deeply regrettable, which one should I put 2 points in? For my sentient toy that's whimsical, does navigation and tinkering. Should they get 2 points in merry or 2 points in bright? In other words, do you want them to be more physically strong and capable or mentally clever but weak? I'm going to give you guys, because there is, if you guys have never really watched streams before, there is a delay of almost a minute between when I say something and when you guys hear it. So I'm going to give you guys a second to think about that. I'm going to drink some water and I'll move on with the game description, but then you tell me how you want to put it. And as per usual, the way I work this is it's sort of like whoever does it best, or not whoever gets the most votes, I'll go with. But if it's a tie, then I just go with whichever one I read first. So moving on for a second. In terms of playing the game, it's just basically you roll 2d6. If your species or special skill would assist you in your action, you roll an additional 1d6, and that's where the things like navigation come in. And then you roll your 2 or 3d6, and based on the result that you get, you add your merry or bright stat to it, and your total number tells you if you failed, which is a 1 to a 6, succeeded but at a cost, which is a 7 to 9, which I'll describe if we get it, a 10 or 11 to succeed, and if we get a 12, which means if it was rolling 2 dice, it would be 2 6s, we gain 1 holiday cheer point, which is just an extra buff for a later roll. Yeah, I don't think I need to explain much more than that, other than to say there's a couple of charts to create our plot premise here, but obviously we'll do that last. Okay, let's see how the votes went. We got a vote for, the first one I see is Witchery Bright, so if it's a tie, we'll go with that. But GS says merry, Zombie Wolf says bright, Jumstore says bright. Now we have to think of bright skills. GS says, don't worry, Tammy. Rory keeps track of all these points. Yeah, don't worry. You don't need to understand this. I do this for the dorks like me who want to know about the actual inner workings of the game. But for anybody else, whoops, I got that reversed. Don't worry about it. That's the 2 minutes where you could zone out, and now we'll move on. So our The vote was to be a smart thing. I'm putting 1 point in Mary, so we're not terrible at it. And then 2 points in Bright, and that uses up our 3 points we had, which means we get a +1 to any score we roll for Bright. Okay, now we get to the fun stuff. That's all that's sort of background. We do need a name for this character. If you can think of any features you would like for this character to have, some elements of their backstory, you can start dumping them in the chat now. Because what we're going to do now is we're going to roll 5d6 to come up with a plot. Yeah. Okay, just putting them in an order. So the first one is 1. So something is missing and something is broken. So the first 2 dice you rolled of your 5d6, if you're doing this at home, will relate to this first list. And I rolled a 1 and a 4, which means Santa's suit is missing. And the naughty or nice list is either missing or broken. So I guess my instinct, and I'm open to other ideas, of course, my instinct is Santa's suit is missing and we accidentally burned the naughty or nice list. Let me know if somebody wants to do something else. Gia says we have to figure out what toy it is. Yeah, we do. And of course, if you guys don't have ideas, don't worry about it. I can always just put something in of my own thinking. Okay, then the next one, which is a 2, is it's all a blur, but the last place you remember seeing the missing item, which is Santa's suit, is the Holly Jolly Tavern. Okay. Okay, and then for the next one, it's a 6, and it seems like they got, the prompt here is, seems like they got really rowdy. The broken item is in bad shape. It's 6 being redecorated for a different holiday. Oh, I said it was burned. I'm gonna keep that. There's one above it there, currently on fire. I'm gonna fudge the dice, because I don't know how to make a redecorated Christmas list. Zombie Wolf says, I would suggest the reindeer are missing and the sleigh burned down, but then we'd probably be here all night. Absolutely. And the last one is 4, which is worst of all. In their drunken merriment, they forgot to do something important, and that is pay the Grinch's protection money. So I specifically don't read these lists ahead of time, because that wouldn't be fun. And I didn't see that coming. Okay. So we have a bunch of things here. Whether we use all of these in the story or not, I mean, probably not. But it's a premise. What about a drunk little sugar plum fairy? Says Witchery. I like that idea. Oh, we're getting a lot of recommendations here. Okay. Tammy Morelli, I think, is in reference to the Holly Jolly Tavern, says where you get the toy booze. Absolutely. They got booze for all types. GS says the operation game where you can't touch certain organs, so he has to be bright because he's not ambulatory. Ambulatory. That's such a weird concept. I kind of like it. Jump Story says racketeering. Here I thought the Grinch had redeemed himself at the end. Well, that's a story he commissioned, you see. He saw a way to make a profit. Okay. So I think I'm going to go with the... I don't know how it's going to work, which is why it's curious to me. The operation guy. Okay. And this is where, if you chose to make other characters of your own, so I'll put up here one more time, they can come in because I can incorporate your characters as a part of the group. Because there's... Basically, it's got to open, like, them sobering up and being like, oh my god, he's going to be back tonight. And the more things we have to talk to, the better. So I am going to roll at least one more character. But if you out there in the land want to roll 4d6 rather, and generate a character, give me a name, go right ahead, I'll incorporate them. Okay. So it's 1, 2, 2, 4. Which is an elf who is grumpy, but somehow is good at caroling and navigation again. I'm re-rolling that. I don't want 2 navigations. Tinkering. Does this thing roll anything but 4s and 6s? There we go. 3. Chopping firewood. Caroling and chopping firewood. Okay. So we have a whimsical toy and a grumpy elf with different skill sets. And for him, I'm not going to throw it back to the crowd because it's already been too long. Jumpstore says Snowflake, the analytical baking reindeer. Okay. Snowflake, the analytical baking reindeer. Okay. If there's a vote on a grumpy elf name, we can go with it. I'm gonna go with Whiskers for now. And for the sentient toy, Mr. Guts, because he's an operations toy, and that's wild. I'm gonna give, whoops. Whiskers, the inverse stats that we have on our main character. There we go. All right. Oh, there's even better ones. Okay. I'm just going to put the name in there, but I am going to get to the writing because I did not realize how long I've been doing this. Okay. It was when Mr. Guts sparked awake in an alley filled with the frosted remnants of beer bottles. He's whimsical, right? He thought of the beauty that the cold northern sun brought to such a kaleidoscope pile of green glass. When he pushed himself up to a seated position. However, he could only ponder how his red light... Where is it on the red light? Is it on his nose? I gotta look at an operation game for a minute. Yeah, it's his nose. That's what I thought. Okay. GS says we're the elves who slow Rory down. Ah, that's whatever. You're the guy, the folks that are here. You're the reason I'm here, really. Slow me down if you want. However, he could only ponder how his red light was buzzing. Not puzzling, buzzing. And blinking. As every part of him was filled with sour beer. And soggy snacks. The buzzing of the strange animated board game that was Mr. Guts. Eventually roused the elf that built him. Supervisor Peter Whiskers. Why Peters? Peter, there's got to be a better first name than Peter. Oh, his liver heard of it. Yeah, I'll try to work that in a little bit later. Jump Store says, oh, should I give Snowflake preferred pronouns? If necessary, their preferred pronouns are she, her, when they don't want to keep calling Snowflake. Yeah, go ahead. Put that in now. Elves in Santa's shop are supposed to be quite old, right? Why do I feel like I'm so far down in my frame today? Maybe I'm just slouching. This is what people came here for. Rouse the elf that built him. Supervisor Peter Whiskers. The short, old, I don't know, 600-year-old melted candle of an elf, dressed in stained and liquor-stained and disheveled uniform of red and green, shouted, "I'll pour whiskey into your damn battery slot if you don't stop buzzing so loud, Mr. Guts." Ice Chomper is also she, her pronouns. Okay. Oh, I didn't put it in here. What's the matter with me? Look at me. Zombie wolf comes up with something, and I'm like, no, that's not good enough. No. Although there's a very good possibility I'll forget. I'll keep it between these two for now. As far as I can tell, the whole town kind of got trashed, so it gives us somewhere to go. Zombie wolf is crying. No, don't cry. I'll make Ice Chomper the hero, although at the way I'm wasting time, I don't think we're going to get to an ending. Mr. Guts, however, how about this? Mr. Guts leaned forward and shook out as much liquor as he could until the buzzing receded, though he noticed his liver had fallen free into the pile of frosted beer. His rigid form being mostly the outline of a man in a boxy form, in a boxy shape, boxy dimension, with no discernible joints. Its rigid form being mostly the outline of a man in a boxy dimension, with no discernible joints, made this impossible. Tammy Morelli says, no wasted time and having fun. You know, it's funny you should say that, Tammy, because I'm on to my winter splash screen right now, but let me just briefly show you what my more typical full splash screen says. This is going to change the music for a minute, so I apologize, but... So, I don't know if you could read that, but if you can't, it says, time you enjoy wasting is not time wasted. So I agree. Man in a boxy dimension with no discernment made this impossible. With a defeated sigh. The board game, I guess, said... Jump Store says, oh, now it resembles Witcher's December. Yeah, it does. With a defeated side, the board game said, Mr. Whiskers. I feel like he's got to have like a really lame voice. Mr. Whiskers, my liver fell out and I cannot retrieve it. Can you help me? Witchery says, if I was near the beach, there'd be an ocean breeze. Yeah. That's the thing that they don't tell you about Hawaii, right? They tell you Hawaii's, hot, but there's such a consistent breeze in Hawaii and the mist off the sea that it's really not very hot. Not in like subjective senses. And so then you think you're tougher than you are, and you go somewhere that's actually hot. Which, frankly, Vancouver in the summer can be brutal. I remember one year we had... I don't know if I'm remembering this wrong, but I think it was over 100% humidity, which I don't know how that works. If it doesn't, then it was 100% humidity. And it was like 42 degrees Celsius or something. This was some years back. And the combination of those two things, like, it's been hotter other places, and there's probably more humidity other places, but those two things combined are not what you expect when you're in Vancouver, I think. Mr. Whiskers, my liver fell out and I cannot retrieve it. Can you help me? Mr. Whiskers suddenly bolted to his feet. His bloodshot eyes, a kintsugi vase of regret, patched and alcohol fueled blood. That's gonna be a confusing line for a lot of people. Alcohol, yeah, whatever. Zombie Wolf says 300 kilometers is not walking distance for them. Why not? Every day. And this is the grind set you need to get into. I get up at 2:30 in the morning. I eat one banana, that's my whole meal for the day, and I walk 300 kilometers in 20 minutes. I think I woke up at noon today, and I mostly looked at my phone. So, in case anyone doesn't know, the parody there. He turned to Mr. Guts and said, "Oh my God. We burned the we burned the, come on, brain. We burned Santa's list. For kindling. Mr. Guts was leaning against the alley wall. And trying to lower his outstretched and inarticulate hand to his liver by sliding carefully over the bricks. He stopped and said, "Did we? I thought that was a dream." Zombie Wolf said, "For a second there, I was really hoping Rory would mistakenly go with the idea of burning Santa's sleigh." I mean, we can add in whatever we want. Mr. Whiskers stumbled to his feet, swaying like a little poetic. Like a tree in the wind. Then grabbed Mr. Guts' hand and dragged him out of the liquor-soaked alley. I think I've used liquor-soaked already, but whatever. It's another way of describing that. Damn, he says, you're evil, zombie wolf. And Jumpstore laughs. Mr. Guts looked back with yearning, softly whispering, "But my liver." Jumpstore says, swaying like one of those wacky inflatable arm flailing guys. Peter Whiskers paid no mind to such trite concerns. Okay. Now. Oh. It's weird that it changed my playlist. Hopefully I didn't accidentally play some copyrighted stuff. Who should come up next? So we have Snowflake and Ice Chomper, the analytical baking reindeer, and the mischievous caroler penguin, or as Benedict Cumberbatch says, penguin. Who do you think that we should go to first to figure out what happened with the come on, brain. The naughty list. I don't know why I can't just bring that to mind. Santa's list. It's like the second time. It's like the noun that my brain doesn't want to work with. And also would be the person who would hook us into the fact that Santa's outfit is missing. GS says the caroler penguin never shuts up. That's a good one. I like that. That might involve me trying to do rhymes, which, if you're a longtime viewer of this channel, you'll know is a recipe for terrible things. Pengu! The Swedish TV show of the little penguin and his family. Note. Zombie Wolf says the Guts voice reminds me of the Icelandic prince from the live stream on Tuesday. For those who didn't watch that, we read this story about this just absolutely useless, pathetic hero who was saved by his dog constantly. I only have about 4 voices, and I used to get away with it when people didn't consistently watch things. Yeah, I guess it makes sense for the baker to have it, right? The baker would do the fire. And I see Gennaro's here and says they're late and don't know what's going on, but that's okay. I'm sure the many happy people in chat can catch you up as to what's happening. He headed... Oh, wait. Let's start a new paragraph. The animated... well, I guess sentient's probably the more appropriate word. The sentient toy and the crabby old elf ran straight up Main Street in the North Pole. Normally, this is an elegant and glittering sight, especially on Christmas Eve. One could expect to see fine blinking lights of ruby and emerald refracting through cones, through bulbs of real crystal. And laden with rows of icicles, I guess, of icicles that would catch their light and glitter right along. However, on this treacherous morning... Oh, I'm way off the page. Sorry about that. On this treacherous morning, the main street of Santa's village was a terrifying swirl of incapacitated, drunk creatures, candy cane puddles, a sour stench of peppermint, and effluent. And the shattered decorations after and the shattered decor and the remains Zombie Wolf says it looks like Christmas at Jonestown. Oh god. They're not dead. And the remains of the shattered decorations from a 2-day party thrown in Santa's absence. The rushed steps of the toy and his maker began to rouse the resting participants of a foul Christmas bacchanal. Jumpstore says Zombie Wolf trying to turn this Christmas into a horror movie. We do that a lot. GS says hot chocolate hot tub. Oh. I know how I could work some of that in. They hopscotched over bottles of scotch. I'm taking my chances with wordplay here. Past a hot tub solidified with 2,000 pounds of fine chocolate. The results of a reindeer experiment to make a hot chocolate tub. The fire's reach was still visible at the edges, at the eaves of the overhanging roofs. Jumpstore says with candy cane floating tubes. Oh yeah, good point. Oh, but I already said it was solid. The fire's reach was still visible at the eaves of the overhanging roofs, including the one that lined, was it Snowflake? Snowflake's fine bakery. Where they were headed. The amount of vomit from their hangovers alone is going to make the North Pole look like a giant peppermint candy. I mean, I'm trying not to make it so repulsive nobody wants to be here, because I realize some people are very squeamish about things like that, but also I also want to imply it for those who are wondering. I forget who gave me Snowflake, but if you have an opinion on what they say when they kick open the door, let me know now. That goes for everybody in chat, frankly, but obviously. Okay. Jumpstore came up with it. Oh, thank you, Jumpstore. The little elf of stout disposition in proportion with its ornery nature, kicked open the bakery door and shouted, oh, GS makes a good point. Snowflake is analytical, so she sizes up whoever enters. Jumpstore says when they kick open the door, they could say that was Belgian chocolate. Okay. Okay, I know what I'll do with that. Yeah. And began to berate in I was gonna say inelegant, but they're a baker, right? She's a baker, so there's only one thing you want in bakers, and that is for them to be plump. Began to berate the plump dough? Is that the term for a female deer? Dough. Me. Female deer. Yes. The song reminds me. The plump dough who ran the bakery for being so foolish as to burn Santa's list. However, before he could get a thought out, Snowflake. Yes, exactly. Jump Store says would explain why she's not one of Santa's reindeer. She's too plump to fly. Gennaro says was just about to type the song. Well, I'll still type the song. It's a great song. Maybe I'll sing it. However, before she could get a thought out, Snowflake was already staring daggers back at Mr. Whiskers and shouted with some restraint, "Peter, did I say you could use the Belgian chocolate in your little experiment?" With the hot tub? The good chocolate? What am I to make the pre-flight meal with now? You're upset about some chocolate? You were there lighting the fire under it like the rest of... I'm thinking of this like an old school hot tub. And do you miserable hog of a deer... Oh, he's grumpy. Remember your bright idea on how to kindle the fire? Peter. I should say this up here. Peter shouted back, "She's a plumpkin," says GS. Aww. Snowflake opened her mouth, which to return a volley of abuse, but instead furrowed her brow and left her mouth hanging, which let loose a whiff of old... What am I forgetting here? LVH. Of old socks and gin. As she clearly struggled to recall what Peter was shouting about. After a long pause, Mr. Guts cut in and said, "Miss Snowflake, could you bake me a new liver? Is that a thing that can be baked?" Oh my god. Snowflake finally said, with widening eyes. We burned the list. We have to run. There's no choice. We can't be here when he gets back. She said, sweating. And hide where? Peter said, grabbing at her ear. You know how it goes. He sees you. Whether you're naughty or nice, but especially if you're naughty. His goons would be on us within a day. Gia says no list is the greatest gift of all. Jumpstore says yes, abandoned ship. Santa has a 364 to 365 days. Eater memorize his list. Can't even do that with such a long time frame. Maybe that's his fault. I'm gonna use that line. Why not? Let's have Snowflake say it. What the hell just happened there? GS says we'll have to hide in the shortbread caves. Maybe we can work in that Grinch thing. Yeah, I think we could. I don't know if I'm going to be able to work in the Lost Santa suit. I think that's a little too far, but I think we could work that in. Like they go there to hide there and then realize that the Grinch is going to turn them in because they didn't pay him. Shortbreads are my favorite cookies. So I haven't mentioned this on stream before, but only within the last month I found out I cannot eat gluten. I can't think of a worse time of year to have recently found that out. But I will say overall I feel much better. It's not the end of the world. Although my partner bought this really expensive shortbread that I love and I eat every year. And it has fancy things like rosemary and gorgonzola cheese in a shortbread, which, depending on how you feel about gorgonzola, may or may not work. They had a pistachio and a Gouda one, and they also had sweet ones as well. They're really, really good. And they cost a lot of money. And you can only get them at certain craft markets. So this one, that place that makes it. I can't eat gluten. So now they're just expensive wastes of time because she doesn't like shortbread very much. So I guess what I'm saying is enjoy all that gluten for me, folks. Snowflake began to heave her plump, pale belly in panicked breaths and started rambling while pacing started pacing and rambling, maybe? Started pacing while rambling. Santa has 364 to 365 days a year. A year to memorize his list. His list. Not mine or yours. His list. I mean, if he can't even do that within such an allotted time frame, a full year, then can we really be to blame? Chum Store says, way ahead of you, Rory. In terms of enjoying gluten, yeah. I'll tell you one thing that's been an advantage is when you read articles about it, about like what can you eat now? They're like, you're gonna have to get used to some strange things like xanthan gum and whatever else. But I don't mention this too much, but I'm I trained as a cook for a while, and I'm really obsessed with cooking. And one of the styles of cooking that I took to, not my only style, but one of the styles was modernist cuisine stuff, specifically a pirated copy of the modernist cuisine cookbooks, because it's an $800 cookbook. So when I was going through this, it was just like I already had all these things, so that was great. I think few people are more suited to this experience than me. Maybe that's his fault. Where's the justice in this? It's not about justice with that red tyrant, and you know it. Whiskers. Mr. Whiskers said in a grave tone. We take all the gems. No, wait, that doesn't work. We take all my cookies that I have baked today, and we go to the shortbread caves. Snowflake began to formulate a plan. I like how I've not used any of their stats for any decision. I'm okay with that. Mr. Guts buzzed into the conversation and said, "But the Grinch and his gang..." Oh, killer. I mean, how dark am I gonna go? Run those caves. No, I see it now. Mr. Whiskers said, "We bribe him with snowflakes, supplies, God knows, a Santa meal is worth a lot in these parts. So, the three made for the caves, abandoning the drunken ruin of Santa Town for the howling winds of a biting, cold tundra. It was said that these plains were once populated with candy cane trees and other goods, but that Santa had strip mined the whole of it and paid protection to Don Grinch. To keep competitors like the Easter Bunny out of his properties. Is it too ambitious to try and work in the Penguin somewhere in here and try to come up with an ending with the Grinch? I also feel like I'm not including enough people's suggestions here. What are some features of the Shortbread Caves that I should include? How about that? Pay protection to Don Grinch to keep you better. The caves were once a magical place where one could carve buttery nuggets of sweet cookies from the walls. Zombie Wolf says, as a half Sicilian, I'm interested in hearing about Don Grinch. Well, you tell me. I'm not half Sicilian. How would Don Grinch introduce himself when he discovers that the people who didn't pay his protection money are coming here looking for protection from the big man himself? This was no more. All the major veins of fine short breadery were exhausted by the Claws mining department. They could have frosting or powdered sugar. Oh yeah, okay. Like, okay, it just sort of has a fog. All that remained in the dark caves was a fog of powdered sugar. That seemed never to settle. In the abode of Don Grinch. Oh, man. GS says, and could be any cookie cutter shape of manageable. It could be stocking shaped or boot shaped or Santa shaped. Yep. Jumpstore says, oh, what about Cindy Lou Who? She could be a capo too. Capo? Capo? I mean, I watched The Godfather. That's as good as. They were not 20 steps. Into one of the shortbread caves. When the menacing squeak of Don Grinch's most vile capo perked up behind them. I think that's a good use of the word perked up, but whatever. I don't remember at all how Cindy Lou Who talked, so we're just sort of ignoring it. Now what do a bunch of deadbeats like this? What are, I guess I should say. What are a bunch of deadbeats like you doing on the Don's doorstep? GS says the penguin could slide down the mountain in the end, singing away. Tammy says sounds wonderful, GS. Jumpstore says, I have books on the history of the mafia and its reign in early to mid 1900s East Coast America. I love true crime in general. I can't say I specifically love true crime, but what I will say is about once every 4 years I fall into some sort of Wikipedia hole where I read about 50,000 different Italian people that I do not remember the names of, who also have nicknames and are a part of various organized crime. Now, what are a bunch of deadbeats like you doing on the Don's doorsteps? Mr. Guts waddled in a circle to face the scowling little girl, Cindy Lou Who. What should Cindy Lou Who's menacing gangster nickname be? You know how it's always like, you know, the Iceman Man or the, you know, stabs a lot. famous New York gangster Joey Stabs a Lot. Just in case you plan on making a fourth Godfather, I'm available to write it. Apparently everyone loves true crime. I'll keep that in mind if you folks are going to show up to these Thursday streams, because there is actually there's a letter writing game based around noir that I found probably 8 or 9 months ago, and I just haven't had a reason to do it. It's like this, but with letters. Maybe we could play that one. GS says, Cindy Lou, who's your daddy? I think that might give the wrong impression. I'm looking for violence. Cindy the Grip? Cindy Lou Who? I feel like the Grip has a context as well. This is a good, accurate reflection of my actual serious writing, which, by the way, I don't even know if I've ever mentioned this. I have a website of stories of me and other Vancouver writers have written that are not published anywhere else. It's down in the description below, but it's varietal-literature.ca. Cindy Lou, is there something to do with killing that starts with who? I'm not going to dwell on this much longer. Just as Cindy Tammy says, my daughter is the most amazing baker and she's 4'11". Aw. I guess that's probably not the reaction a person who's 4'11" wants, but it is sweet. And 118 pounds. I think my left leg is 118 pounds. Tiny. I am not. She's also a vegetarian and everything organic. Delicious food for sure. Ah, yeah. There is some very, very good, delicious vegetarian and vegan food. I am 6'5", and I actually fear to know what I weigh. Generally somewhere between 220 and 280. All right. Mr. Guts waddled in a circle to face the scowling little girl, Cindy Lou Who, now known just as Sydney the Snapper. I don't know. How about we just go with the stupid one I came up with before? Cindy stabs a lot. It's so bad. It's so lazy. Mr. Guts waddled in a circle and said, suddenly just made up a spelling of said. Now what are a bunch of deadbeats? We aren't deadbeats. I'm just missing a few pieces. Like my liver. Do you have a liver I can borrow? Ms. Who? Zombie Wolf being reassuring. Stabs a lot isn't bad. We literally have characters named Mr. Whiskers, Mr. Guts, and Snowflake. Yeah, but I think those names are all directly out of Shakespeare, as I understand it. Remember, it's Romeo and Mr. Peter Whiskers, and then he goes and he like tries to get Juliet from Snowflake, the handmaiden. And then they have to fight Mr. Guts, who is an amalgamation of eldritch horrors. You know, I don't know if I remember the story exactly, but I do remember that it ends with Romeo and Juliet combining powers into a mech suit partially operated by Mr. Whiskers and Snowflake, right? Or is that Hamlet? Do you have a liver I can borrow, Mrs. Sue? Miss Sue? How about his? Jumpstart says he missed an opportunity to reference a Winter's Tale, Rory. I have performed Shakespeare, by the way. Not that anyone was asking. Cindy whipped out. Specifically, it's not a well-known one. Why can't I think of their name right now? It's the one about a prince stranded on an island. There's like The Tempest. I played the prince in The Tempest. How about him? Cindy whipped out her candy, her Switch. Whipped out a whittled candy cane. With a spear point. And pressed it against Mr. Whisker's neck. Maybe you help me teach a lesson to the old man here about paying debts on time. Everyone is talking about Winter's Tale. You know, when people talk about Winter's Tale and Shakespeare, why does anyone think of Winter's Tale when talking about Shakespeare? It's like such a forgotten one of his. Gia says there, as in they are. Did I misspell that somewhere? Maybe you help me teach a lesson to the old man here about paying debts on time. And I let you keep his liver. Mr. Guts looked a bit confused. Then waddled to face Mr. Whiskers and said, Jumpstore says exit pursued by a bear is a timeless line. That's true. Mr. Guts looked a bit confused, then waddled to face Mr. Whiskers and said, would that be okay? Do you like learning? Can I borrow your liver? This compelling character arc I've created. Zombie Wolf says, speaking of bears, how is a penguin possible character in the North Pole but not a polar bear? I think because of the violence that entails. And then GS gave me an ending here that I think I'm going to take some cues from. We are heading towards an ending. I am aware it's been an hour and a half. Hey, you want to know something cool? I have polar bear hair. I used to teach as a adult as a part of my career. I don't do that anymore. But I had a fellow who had a polar bear that was used in movies, and he just brought in a Ziploc bag of real polar bear hair that I still have, and it is so cool. It is not like normal hair at all. Not even like normal fur. It almost feels synthetic. We won't be needing to do that, Snowflake said carefully. Zombie Wolf says, I don't know, Rory. The reindeer isn't currently goring anyone with her antlers. Do female reindeers also get the antlers big enough to gore things with? I don't actually know that much about reindeer. I'm looking it up. Well, apparently, yeah. And then there's like 50 articles about why they do it, and obviously I'm not reading an article in the middle of my stream. We won't be needing to do that, Snowflake said carefully. Because we brought Santa's dinner as an apology for our forgotten protection payments still warm from my oven. Go on, take a look. Snowflake prodded the bag of fine baked goods towards Cindy Lou. Jumstore says, oh yeah, don't the males shed their antlers in winter or something like that? I'll take your word for it. I don't actually know that much about animal biology. The only biology I was really any good at was neurobiology and Unity, and that's over a decade old's worth of knowledge at this point. Towards Cindy Lou, Snowflake prodded the bag of fine baked goods towards Cindy Lou. She dropped the candy cane from Whisker's neck and looked cautiously into the plump reindeer's sack. Just as Cindy's head peered into the bag, Snowflake screeched a warrior's roar and ran her antlers into the bag, spearing Cindy Lou in a savage strike. Her cries seemed to stir up the Grinch's thugs down further in the cave. Farther? Farther. We gotta run, Mr. Guts said, despite lacking any ability to do so. the gruesome bag of baked goods and punished and bodies, I guess. The gruesome bag, not bag, was still stuck to Snowflake's antlers as they ran for the door, for the exit of the Shortbread Caves. Mr. Getz was far too slow. Mr. Whiskers and Snowflake could only hear the echoes of his buzzing alarm and the flashing of his red nose across the cave walls. As Grinch and his thugs descended upon him. Oh, we're almost out. We're almost done. We should go back, said Snowflake. Said, I literally make 200 of him a day. It will be fine. Mr. Whiskers barked. Okay, but Snowflake cut in as they started running down the snowy slopes of Candy Cane Mountain. Existentially, having a common essential nature is not equivalent to a common lived, you said analytical, lived experience. One might propose that essence precedes existence, but one cannot propose that existence is replaced by essence. Can you guess what my other half of my degree was? But before the issue could be settled, everyone's favorite giant penguin. What was the name? It's been way too long. Ice Chomper. Ice Chomper. Slid up behind the fleeing two, singing loudly, Santa Claus is coming to town. F's in the chat, yeah. For those who are not culturally on the internet enough to know, there was a game probably 12 years ago at this point where you went to a funeral for a soldier, and then in just a weird moment that didn't really work, when you walked up to the coffin of your friend, it gave you a prompt to push the button F to mourn, which is just weird. So, they were swept upon his magical back and carried back into town because, of course, Ice Chomper was both the head of Santa's private army and a noted caroling snitch. And what happened after that has been redacted. So, but Christmas happened all the same. So none should be worried or investigate any speculation about the events hitherto. This is the weirdest story I've ever written on this stream. Tammy says, yeah, Jumpstore says Call of Duty. I did actually know it was Call of Duty, but I didn't think that would mean anything to somebody if they didn't know the F in chat thing. Oh yeah, I forgot. Did I say she? I don't remember if I actually used any pronouns about her. His. I said his. Her. Her magical back. Carried into town. Ice Jumper was... Gia says, bravo, Rory. Somehow through all the chaos you did it again. Well, let's see what I actually did, because now we're going to read it back. And share in the horror of what we did. We used none of the game mechanics. So if you came here to learn about the game, that doesn't matter. We mostly just use the games for prompts. All right. If you're coming to this part of the show, it's because you just want to know what we came up with. And we came up with another doozy. Christmas apparently is a very strange time of year for this show. We played a game called Oh Holy ... What Happened Last Night. And it's basically The Hangover meets Santa's village. The elves were left alone, they got drunk, and they trashed the village. And then you roll some dice to get various characters, and there's abilities, and we never actually used any of that. But we also rolled to get some prompts on the plot. And that's revealed through the writing. So I'm going to read it back to show you the nightmare that we have built. When Mr. Guts sparked awake in an alley filled with the frosted remnants of beer bottles, he thought of the beauty that the cold northern sun brought to such a kaleidoscope pile of green glass. And when he pushed himself up to a seated position, however, he could only ponder how his red nose light, was buzzing and blinking as every part of him was filled with sour beer and soggy snacks, the many cavities of his form. The buzzing of the strange animated board game that was Mr. Guts eventually roused the elf who had built him and was sleeping nearby, named Supervisor Peter Whiskers. The short 600-year-old melted candle of an elf dressed in a liquor-stained and disheveled uniform of red and green shouted to Mr. Guts, "I'll pour whiskey into your damn battery slot if you don't stop buzzing so loud, Mr. Guts." Well, Mr. Guts leaned forward, shook out as much liquor as he could until the buzzing receded, though he noticed his liver had fallen free under the pile of frosted beer bottles. And his rigid form, being mostly the outline of a man in a boxy dimension with no discernible joints, made this near impossible. With a defeated sigh, the board game said, "Mr. Whiskers, my liver fell out. I cannot retrieve it. Can you help me?" Mr. Whiskers suddenly bolted to his feet, his wide, bloodshot eyes a kintsugi vase of regret patched in alcohol-fueled blood. He turned to Mr. Guts and said, "Oh my God, we burned Santa's list for kindling!" Mr. Guts was leaning against the alley wall, trying to lower his outstretched, inarticulate arm down to his liver by sliding carefully against the brick wall. He stopped and said, "Did we? I thought that was a dream." Mr. Whiskers stumbled to his feet, swaying like a tree in the wind, then grabbed Mr. Guts' hand and dragged him out of the liquor-soaked alley. Yeah, see, I did use liquor-soaked twice. Mr. Guts looked back with yearning and softly whispered, I guess, "But my liver." Peter Whiskers paid no mind to such trite concerns as the liver of this toy. The sentient toy and the crabby old elf ran straight up Main Street, up there in the North Pole. Now, normally this is an elegant, glittering sight, especially on Christmas Eve, which it was. One could expect to see fine blinking lights of ruby and emerald refracting through bulbs of real crystal and laden with rows of icicles that would just catch the light and glitter, right along. However, on this treacherous morning, the main street of Santa's village was a terrifying swirl of incapacitated drunks, candy cane puddles, a sour stench of peppermint and effluent, and remains of the shattered decorations from a 2-day party thrown in Santa's absence. The rushed steps of the toy and his maker began to rouse the resting participants of a foul Christmas bacchanal. They hopscotched over bottles of scotch past a hot tub filled with solidified 2,000 pounds of solidified fine chocolate. The results of a reindeer experiment to make a hot chocolate tub. The fire's reach from the tub was still visible at the eaves of the overhanging roof, including the one that lined Snowflake's fine bakery, which is where they were headed. The little elf, of stout disposition in proportion with his ornery nature, kicked open the bakery door and began to berate a plump doe of white fur, I never said that, who ran the bakery for being so foolish as to burn Santa's list. However, before Mr. Whiskers could get a thought out, Snowflake was already staring daggers back at Mr. Whiskers and shouted with some restraint, "Peter, did I say you could use the Belgian chocolate in your little experiment with the hot tub? The good chocolate. What am I to make the pre-flight meal with now?" Peter shouted back, "You're upset about some chocolate? You were there lighting the fire under it like the rest of us. And do you, miserable hog of a deer, remember your bright idea on how to kindle the fire? Snowflake opened her mouth to return a volley of abuse, but instead furrowed her brow and left her mouth hanging, which let loose a whiff of old socks and gin, as she clearly struggled to recall what Peter was shouting about. After a long pause, Mr. Guts cut in and said, "Miss Snowflake, could you bake me a new liver? Is that a thing that can be baked?" "Oh my God," Snowflake finally said with widening eyes. We burned the list. We have to run. There's no choice. We can't be here when he gets back," she said, sweating. "And hide where?" Peter said, grabbing at her ear. "You know how it goes. He sees you, whether you're naughty or nice, but especially if you're naughty. And we have been naughty. His goons would be on us within a day." Snowflake began to heave her plump, pale belly and panicked breasts, and started pacing while rambling. "Santa, it's not our fault. Santa has 364 to 365 days a year to memorize his list. His list, not mine or yours. His list. I mean, if he can't even do that within such an allotted time frame, a full year, then can we really be blamed? Maybe that's his fault. Where's the justice in this, You and I both know it's not about justice with that red tyrant, and you know it." Mr. Whiskers said in a grave tone, "We take all my cookies." It's a different sentence. "We take all my cookies that I have baked today, and we go to the Shortbread Caves." Snowflake began to formulate a plan. Mr. Guts buzzed into the conversation and said, "But the Grinch and his gang of killers run those caves." No, I see it now," Mr. Whiskers said. "We bribe 'em with Snowflake's supply of fine baking. God knows a Santa meal is worth a lot in these parts." So the three made for the caves, abandoning the drunken ruin of Santa Town for the howling winds of a biting cold tundra. It was said that these plains were once populated with candy cane trees and other goods, but that Santa had strip-mined the whole of it and paid protection to Don Grinch to keep competitors like the Easter Bunny out of his properties. The caves were of this sort. They were once a magical place where one could carve buttery nuggets of sweet cookies from the very walls, but this was no more. All the major veins of fine shortbreadery were exhausted by the Claw's mining department. All that remained in the dark caves was a fog of powdered sugar that seemed never to settle, and the abode of Don Grinch. They were not 20 steps into one of the shortbread caves when the menacing squeak of Don Grinch's most vile capo perked up behind them. "Now what are a bunch of deadbeats like you doing on the Don's doorsteps?" Exactly what she sounds like in the movie. Mr. Guts waddled in a circle to face the scowling little girl, Cindy Lou Who, now known just as Cindy Stabs a Lot, and said, "We aren't deadbeats. I'm just missing a few pieces like my liver. Do you have a liver I can borrow, Miss Who?" "How about him?" Cindy whipped out a whittled candy cane with a spear point and pressed it into the neck of Mr. Whiskers. "Maybe you help me teach a lesson to the old man here about paying debts on time, and I'll let you keep his liver." If anyone is watching the movie with a friend who is not privy to this stream, please just start talking over her lines like this. Mr. Guts looked a bit confused, then waddled to face Mr. Whiskers and said, "Would that be okay? Do you like learning? Can I borrow your liver?" "We won't be needing to do that," Snowflake said carefully, "because we brought Santa's dinner as an apology for our forgotten protection payments. Still warm from the oven? Go on, take a look." Snowflake prodded the bag of fine goods towards Cindy Lou Who with her rack of antlers. Cindy dropped the candy cane from Whisker's neck and looked cautiously into the plump reindeer's snack. And just as Cindy's head peered into the bag, Snowflake screeched a warrior's roar and rammed her antlers into the bag, spearing Cindy Lou through. Cindy Lou through in one savage strike. Her cries echoed through the caves, and it could be heard that she had stirred up her fellow thugs in Grinch's gang farther down in the cave. "We gotta run," Mr. Guts said, despite lacking any ability to do such a thing. The gruesome bag of baked goods and bodies was still stuck to Snowflake's antlers as the party ran for the exit of the Shortbread Caves. But Mr. Guts was far too slow, and Mr. Whiskers and Snowflake could only hear the echoes of his buzzing alarm and the flashing of his red nose across the cave walls as Grinch and his thugs descended upon him, flashing out in silhouettes of crimson light, their violence. "We should go back," Snowflake said. "I literally make 200 of them a day," Mr. Whiskers barked. "It will be fine." "Okay, but," Snowflake cut in as they started running down the snowy slopes of Candy Cane Mountain, "existentially having a common essential nature is not the equivalent to a common lived experience. One might propose, excuse me, Mr. Whiskers, one might propose that essence precedes existence, but one cannot propose that existence is replaced by one's essence." But before the issue could be settled, everyone's favorite giant penguin, who I've definitely mentioned before in the story, Ice Chomper, slid up behind the fleeing two, singing her carols loudly. "Santa Claus is coming to town." She was also tone deaf. They were swept upon her magical back and carried back into town because, of course, Ice Chomper was both the head of Santa's private army and a noted caroling snitch. What happened after that has mostly been redacted, but at Christmas happened all the same, so none should be worried or investigate any speculation about the events hitherto. Zombie Wolf says, "Is that a thing that can be baked?" Should have said, "Let me show you how a reindeer gets baked." That's why she needed the chocolate. Oh, I get it. Speaking of Christmas movies, did you notice that the Rankin Bass Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer movie, that's when Santa meets Rudolph for the first time, he says a very interesting line, and I quote, "Every year I shine up my jingle bells for 8 lucky reindeer." Well, I did not notice that. Good Lord. All right. Well, that was a long episode. It's been a while since I've done one that was 2 hours long. Thank you so much, Jumstore, Tammy, Zombie Wolf, GS, Witchery, Genera, and probably somebody else that I am forgetting, for joining me on the tremendous silliness that was this very weird game. I will say this game didn't have the best graphic, like front page. It wasn't so eye-catching. Its icon is what I'm trying to say. Its icon wasn't so eye-catching on the page. The one on this video was one I made myself out of other stuff. It's not like I made it from scratch. I used, clip art and stuff. But which I think is a bit of a shame, because I think this is one of the better Christmas games I've found, and I do recommend that you guys go and play it. I will have a link to it down in the description below when this video isn't live. I think it's free, but you can always donate, and you always should, to creators if you can. But at the very least, leave a review so that it doesn't fizzle away, because I think there's cool ideas here. Ours went a very zany direction, but I think there's fun in here. It is also meant to be played with multiple people. It's not truly a solo, although I think a solo could work, as we sort of showed. But I don't know, if you're the type of person who doesn't have much going on around the holidays and you would just want to hang out with your friends and play a dumb game, I think this could be fun. As for me, well, I'm gonna go feed my cat who is complaining because we've gone long. And as for you, well, you don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. Get out of my shop.